Thousands of years ago, in the middle of the desert, a civilization was born that built sky-touching pyramids. That was the Egyptian civilization. These pyramids, made from millions of stones, still amaze scientists today. Because without iron tools, without wheels, and without any modern machines, how did they manage to place such massive stones and build these giant structures? And if they were capable of creating such incredible monuments, what was their daily life like? What did they eat? What did they drink? And why do some of their traditions still seem so mysterious today? Recently, when scientists sent robots into the hidden tunnels inside the pyramids, what they discovered there shocked the entire world. So, to discover the terrifying traditions of the Egyptian civilization, make sure to watch this video till the very end. Around 8,000 years ago, humans had already learned farming and agriculture. In some parts of the world, people had started building small settlements and living together. But across a huge region of our planet, nature was playing a terrifying game. That vast area of North Africa, which we now know as the Sahara, the driest and deadliest desert on Earth, was not always like this. Scientists call this period the African Humid Period. From around 11,000 BC to 5,000 BC, for nearly 6,000 years, the Sahara was a completely different world. For miles and miles, there were green savannas and enormous lakes. Many nomadic hunting tribes lived there, living in harmony with nature. Evidence of this has been found at a place called Nabta Playa. Today, it is a dry desert in southern Egypt, but around 7,000 BC, there was once a lake there. Near that lake, people built a massive stone circle that followed the movement of the sun. It is considered the world's oldest stone calendar. This means the people of the Sahara possessed advanced knowledge, but then the direction of the winds changed. According to scientists, around 5,500 BC, a slight change occurred in the tilt of the Earth's axis. Just a few degrees of change permanently shifted the path of Africa's monsoon winds, and before their eyes, that green world began to burn away. Lakes that had existed for hundreds of years dried up and turned into mud. The scorching sand took over the place of trees and plants. Now there was no path left open for those nomadic tribes. From the western desert and the barren eastern lands, terrified and thirsty people, along with their children and surviving livestock, were pushed in only one direction. They walked for miles upon miles across the burning sands, searching for a place where they could at least find a sip of water. During this deadly journey, the weak were buried beneath the sand. But those who managed to survive this terrifying path one day witnessed a miraculous sight on the horizon, something that changed the entire history of mankind. Cutting through the burning golden desert, a vast, calm blue line was flowing from north to south, the Nile River. When those exhausted and devastated hunters touched the cold water, they felt their journey had finally come to an end. They thought they had finally found drinking water. They still had no idea that beside the very river where they were resting that day, their future generations would one day build pyramids so massive that even thousands of years later, they would continue to leave humanity speechless. But an even bigger question still remained. How did the people who, until yesterday, survived only by hunting, who had neither advanced technology nor great wealth, eventually become the civilization that built sky-touching pyramids? When the Nile brought devastating floods every year and drowned everything, how did they manage to control those uncontrollable waters and begin farming? The nomadic people had finally quenched their thirst. They thought they would simply hunt near the river and survive. But there was one thing they did not know.
This river was no ordinary river. Every year during a specific season, the calm Nile would suddenly transform into something terrifying. Its waters would swell and rise, and within moments, miles of land along the banks would disappear beneath the floods. At first, the hunters believed it was the curse of some god. They would run to higher ground just to save their lives. But a few weeks later, when the floodwaters finally receded, they discovered that it had left behind not destruction, but something extraordinary. something that forced those nomadic people to settle permanently on this land. After the floods, miles upon miles of thick, black, wet soil would cover the riverbanks. It was the world's most fertile silt, carried down from the mountains of Ethiopia. The people of those tribes noticed something magical. Whenever seeds of wild grass, especially wheat and barley, fell onto that black soil, new green plants would begin to grow within a short time. For people who had spent thousands of years chasing animals, it felt like a sudden flash of lightning in their minds. They thought, if we intentionally plant these seeds into the soil ourselves, will we ever have to starve again? This was how people first planted wheat and barley seeds in the fertile soil along the banks of the Nile. But there was one major problem. The floodwaters would eventually return to the river, and within a few days, the wet soil could dry up and become as hard as stone. If the soil dried out, the crops would burn and die. This was where those ancient people used an idea so brilliant that it made them the world's first engineers. They realized that simply planting seeds was not enough. They also had to keep water in the fields. So, using tools made of stone and wood, people began digging small canals from the Nile to their farmlands. They also built mud barriers around the fields so that during floods, water would remain trapped inside those canals and pits. Even after the floods receded, the fields stayed wet for a long time. For the first time in human history, mankind had brought the power of nature's water under its control, and this agriculture changed human life forever. Once people planted seeds with irrigation and crops began to grow, it was no longer possible to leave them behind and move somewhere else. The crops had to be protected, and from that moment, the feet of the endlessly wandering nomads finally stopped. The nomadic way of life came to an end. Along the banks of the Nile, the first permanent huts made of reeds and mud began to appear. The hunter had now become a farmer. Along with farming, people also started raising cattle, sheep, and goats. Within just a few years, this irrigation system revealed its true power. Mountains of grain began piling up in front of the huts. For the first time, humans produced far more wheat and barley than they actually needed. To store all that grain, deep underground pits and huge mud warehouses were built. These grain storehouses were the world's first true wealth. And when people had full stomachs and stored food for the future, the population began to grow rapidly. What had started as a small tribe with only a few huts slowly expanded into large villages and eventually into cities. These growing settlements became the foundation of the great Egyptian civilization. But wherever wealth exists, conflict is born. As these small villages transformed into large cities, struggles began over control of the most fertile lands, the grain storehouses, and the waters of the Nile.